how do you account for inflation in retirement planning? It's not so easy as they teach you, and here's why. All right, so how do you account for inflation in retirement planning? Like, how do you calculate that number? What's the formula that you're gonna use? I'm gonna give you my formula based on what I've seen from real life experience versus what everybody else has been teaching about inflation. It's not what you think, and here's how. Okay, so let's talk about inflation first and foremost. Like, we know that prices are going up, right? We see that inflation goes up each and every year pretty much, but what is it really? Now, I'll tell you from my experience, when I used to be a financial advisor, I would go and put your numbers in a calculator. You've seen it before, right? Either they got their nice little calculator or they got some program that they're gonna show you how much money you're gonna have in retirement based on a bunch of numbers they have no control over in the first place. One of those of which is inflation. The other was like stock market returns and everything else. Well, I remember trying to put in those numbers and I show people, like, if you put in X amount of dollars per month or per year for this many years, compounding at this rate, like I tell them like 12%, which I found was BS later, so I started putting in 8% later on. And I started compounding that over so many years, I'd say, here's the amount of money you have. And it'd be usually into the millions. I was like, look, you're a millionaire, you're a multimillionaire. Aren't you happy? Now the real question came be, they're like, yeah, but what's that gonna be worth in 40 years? I said, well, yeah, let's put in the inflation number. Now, I will tell you this, when I first started out as a financial advisor, I would put in that standard 3% inflation that they always tell you about, right? 3%, 3%. It's like you hear it so often in the news and the media, you think, well, that's just gotta be what it is. So I put that 3% in there. And the sad thing is, when I would show it to people and show them what they should be pulling out, especially if you're only making 8%, it got really depressing. So you know what I did? I changed it to 2%. Which is what the feds try to tell you it should be, right? Even though it hasn't been, but they tell you it should be 2%. So I put the 2% in there and be like, oh, good. It's not so bad anymore. Look, you have some money. You can still have a meager middle-class lifestyle now after slaving and saving away for 40 years. They're like, oh, good. But again, I would always think in the back of my mind, yeah, but is it 2%? Well, here's what I found out, guys. I'm like, one, first and foremost, from your real life experience, it's not 2% a year. Because you know what 2% a year means? It means that prices only double once every 26 years. So once every quarter century, you finally see it double. That means that the prices in 1999 would be half what they are today. Most of us are saying, no, I think more like 2010 was half the prices of what we have today. And you probably wouldn't be wrong. And that's the problem. If you go to a website called shadowstats.com, at ShadowStats, the guy was in the 1970s, he was actually using inflation numbers that the feds were reporting back then. And he would use it for the airlines. And the airlines would use it because they wanted to know exactly what's their profit per seat, per passenger that they're making on the plane. So he would throw in all these different elements, including inflation, to make sure you account for that. Well, the crazy thing is, as they got into the late 70s, they said, hey, your model's not working anymore. We're starting to lose money. You got it wrong. He said, well, how can it be wrong? Like, I'm putting in all the numbers just the way they should be. He found out that starting in the late 1970s, ever since Jimmy Carter, they've been tweaking with the inflation numbers. Why? Well, I'll tell you why, because that's when they realized there was a problem with the baby boomers. They started realizing, wait, baby boomers, and now the Gen Xers have been born over the last 10, 15 years as they were looking at it, right? They're like, you know what, if this keeps up, if there's not as many Gen Xers as the baby boomers, all these Gen Xers have to somehow fund the baby boomers' retirement with Social Security. This is a problem. So Social Security, every year they raise it based on your inflation numbers that they report. The cost of living increases, they talk about it, right? Well, they would say, well, then we got to make sure that we make that number lower. So then we don't have to raise it up as much and we won't run out of money as quickly because we kind of use Social Security as a Ponzi scheme, sadly enough. So anyways, long story short, just about every president you've seen, Republican, Democrat alike, has been manipulating with the inflation numbers. So shadowstats.com says, what's the actual pre-1980 measurement? What is it really? And you'll be shocked to see, guys, that the average inflation has been more like about 7% higher than what they tell you. So they're telling you right now that inflation is 2.5%. It's really closer to like 9%. That should shock you. That means, using that same rule of 72, 9% means the inflation would double every 8 years, not every 26 years or every 24 years or whatever it might be, right? That they're thinking about. It's not that at all. So you got to be careful. You got to be aware. By the way, I just said 26 years. That's actually 36 years if it's 2%. Definitely not every 36 years. 3% would be every 24 years. We're definitely seeing prices double sooner than that. And so just be aware that even if you don't accept that 7% more, where it's like more like 9-10% average, I would argue that maybe it's not that much for most people. Still, even if we lower it to 5% a year, you'll start to realize that if you're earning 8% in the market, you're only making you have 5% inflation rate, now it gets depressing. it gets really depressing. And 5%, that means that prices double roughly about every 14 years. I would say that's pretty conservative for a number. So when you try to account for inflation retirement plan, try putting that into a financial calculator, and you realize you've got to save a heck of a lot more than you thought. Now, let me give you an easy formula if you're trying to use mutual funds and things like that. Now, I'm going to show you a way to do it much better that you won't even have to worry about inflation as much. But let's just talk about mutual funds. If you're going to do that, now this is what I thought before, because you got to understand again, there's always these assumptions, right? For example, you've heard of 4% rule. It's not, because of inflation being higher, it's more like a 3% rule now if you retire in your 60s. If you're trying to retire young, it's a 2% rule. That means that if you say we go with the 3% rule, that whatever number you want to live on per year, multiply by 33. So for example, if you want to live on $100,000 a year, you need about $3.3 million in mutual funds today, right? Now, if you are trying to retire young, you want $100,000 a year, you got to have about $5 million. You got to times it by 50. That 2% is, times 50 gives you the 100, right? So you got to have it multiply that number by 50 times to retire with that number today. But like I said, with inflation, every about 10 to 15 years, we see it double. So that means every 10 to 15 years away from your goal that you got to now double that number. So let's just go with that 100,000 a year. Let's just say you're going for that mid-60s 3%. You want 100,000 a year, you got to have 3.33 million. But in about, say, 12 years or so, if you got 12 years to go, you got to double that number to be about 6.66 million now. That makes it tougher, doesn't it? Now, if you have another 12 years, maybe you have 25 years ago, that might need to be now, instead of just 6.66, now you're looking at 13.33 million. You got to have saved up just to have live on a 100,000 year lifestyle in a quarter of a century. It might sound like a lot, but this is why so many people realize they need Social Security to be able to retire. They're like, I can't do it. I can't just do it on my investments alone. It's so rare that people do it unless they've been packing so much money away. They're usually very high income earners, and then they live on very little. That's how they do it. They have a minimalist lifestyle making high incomes. Most people, though, aren't making huge high incomes, and even if they try to live on a minimalist lifestyle, it's just not enough. This is why my dad, who was the penny pinching saver, saved everything he could, getting a match from his 401k, and paid off all of his debt early, even though he was 100% debt free, packing money away. I had to look at his situation and say, Dad, you're in your 60s, you're gonna have to die in 5 or 6 years before you run out of money, or you will run out of money. And so he had to work into his 70s, and even then, even after saving a lot, he's still stretched out all of his dollars over the last 10 years. And he's at the point, it's like, man, I'm a year away from losing everything, from having nothing left, and then having to rely on us, to help him out. And that's with Social Security paying him over the last 15 plus years. So think about that. That's the problem with inflation, is that it's much higher than what they've been reporting, and that should concern you. This is why so many people, they think they're on track, they think they've saved enough, and it hasn't been enough. Because one, the stock market doesn't do as well, and then two, inflation is higher than they thought. So as I promised, what's the answer? This is where I show people about how do you create passive income right now? Because the biggest thing is you want to have that income right away, right? You want to have the income as soon as possible, and you want as much of it as possible. And so like I had somebody who, the same thing happened. He had $1 million he saved up. He was 60 years old, retired from the military. He said, all right, what do I do? Financial advisor says, live on 3%. That's $30,000 a year. He says, I don't want to live on $30,000 a year. That's poverty line. That's even below the poverty line for the state of California. I don't want to do that. And so instead, he started looking for those alternative investments. He wanted to look outside of Wall Street, outside of mutual funds. And what did he find? He found us. He found this Money Ripples channel, right? Which, by the way, if you haven't, subscribe. And so he found us, and the next thing you know, we started getting him into different things with real estate where it pays him income. And the income is paying double-digit returns, 10+% a year. So now his $1 million is paying him over $100,000 a year. He didn't even have to save up as much. Now remember, $30,000 a year, that's the crazy thing. For some of our clients that made $30,000 a year of passive income, they only needed roughly about $300,000, $350,000 or so to do that. But again, because we get money working harder now you don't have to worry about inflation. Had another guy that came to us saying, I've got $3 million and I'm packing away $200,000 a year that I'm adding to this $3 million each and every year. And then I went to my financial advisor who says, you got to keep saving the same amount for at least the next 13 to 15 years, and then maybe you'll be able to retire with that $18 million, given inflation and everything else. By the way, I did the numbers. I actually replicated it for him. He made inflation about 2%. He didn't make it the full 3%, and he made the stock market much higher than it's probably going to pay him. So the likelihood is, if this guy wants the really free lifestyle that he wanted with millions and millions of dollars, he's probably going to have to save into his late 60s before he can finally retire. I showed him, I said, listen, you want even a $500,000 a year lifestyle, take your $3 million, that's 10%, that you're making on some of these investments that have contractual type of returns that you get, is like 10% on 300,000 already makes you 300,000 a year, which you could actually be financially independent today. Screw inflation. If you already know what the dollar is today, you can actually be retired right now. You don't even have to wait until you're like 15 plus years out. I was like, but if you want to get $500,000 a year, give us 4 more years with the way you've been saving money, and you'll still be there by the time you're in your late 50s. He's like, that sounds better. And he's right. The speed is everything. If you want to beat inflation, find a way to create more income with that cash now versus socking it away, slaving it, and saving it away, and hoping that someday you might have enough, maybe if you're lucky. In most cases, that's 98% of the time it's not. Then you hope that you can make it worthwhile. By the way, that's a statistic, guys. Fidelity did their stats. Only about 900,000 of their 45 million clients have at least $1 million. But of those, Transamerica studied those same people that had over $1 million in those accounts and said, hey, there's already 35% of these people that don't believe they'll even have a chance of retirement. They think it'll take a miracle to be able to retire. Think of that. Only about 2% of people have over $1 million, but a third of that 2% don't think they can even retire anyways, because living on that 3% doesn't work. The best way to do it is create income. Focus on compounding income, not compounding interest. If you want to learn how to do that, go to moneyripples.com. There's a passive income calculator to see what you could do right today in the next 12 months before inflation kicks your butt. In the next 12 months, how much passive income can you create? Try that free calculator at moneyripples.com.